Hello and welcome to episode number 51 of Behind the Impact. I'm your host, Jeremy Brown. In this episode, Liz Minné, the head of global sustainability strategy at Interface, joins the show. Liz, welcome to Behind the Impact.
Hi, Jeremy. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining me. Really excited to learn more about you, your background, and everything on the sustainability front at Interface. But before we get into Interface and everything like that, I want to go back in time and learn more about your career journey. I feel like you're destined to be in sustainability based off of, where you went to school, what you did at college, and then your career trajectory. But could you give me that kind of timeline from college until joining Interface?
Yeah, absolutely. So it really is the perfect place where I've landed, but I'll share about my journey on getting here. So in college, I majored, my bachelor's, I should say, was in polymer and fiber engineering, which is such a niche topic, right? But actually, a lot of people in that field end up working in the plastics arena or within textiles. So, pretty natural fit there. What happened for me was I was on a summer abroad and doing a study abroad in France, and there was a class on sustainable engineering, which was a new field I had never heard of. And it was my spear in the chest moment of, oh my gosh, there's a field out there where I can take my love of science and math and materials and marry that with sustainability, something I've feel a lot of purpose behind and very passionate about. So that was that moment where I realized, holy cow, there is something out here that takes both of those and makes it a career. Let me stick around. And I did my master's and PhD in environmental engineering after that, and actually studied life cycle assessment of building products. So how much closer could I get with where I wanted to be? And I had heard about Interface along the way. It was a bit of a journey getting here. I worked for a small architecture firm that focused on LEED buildings, and I used what I learned from that to leverage my way into a corporate sustainability job, which is really where I wanted to end up. They were building a new building that wanted to be a LEED headquarters, and that was ThyssenKrupp Elevator, also in the built environment space. And that's where I learned a lot about greenhouse gas accounting and how to really look at reducing emissions on a corporate scale. And then I got the call from Interface, and it was destiny because I had all this great background in polymer and fiber and textiles, matched with my passion for sustainability. And this is the perfect place, as a very mission driven, purpose driven organization on sustainability. So I'm very grateful to have landed here.
Was there a moment in time when you realized that sustainability and the corporate sector was just a good match for your career?
I think it's an interesting question because I think a lot of people would say, oh, those are separate things and they don't often want to talk to each other. But I think what I have learned throughout my time is you can be really great at sustainability, in terms of the environment, but if you aren't thinking about the business side, then you really can't scale it up. And that's what I found gave me so much excitement and passion around a place like Interface. Is this is a place where you can really prove that in a for-profit company that is heavily, it's we've done a lot to reduce the amount of virgin plastics in our materials, but still like heavily reliant on the plastics industry. Given all of that, if we can do it at Interface. Why can't anyone else? So that has really driven me to think through how do we be the proving case that shows everyone else how to do it? And then we can scale it in a way that's meaningful.
Talk a little bit more about what scaling sustainability at a corporation looks like.
Right. So um, I would say that at any sort of corporation, first and foremost, you got to figure out what is making up most of your impact. And so I can talk from my experience in really both the built sectors I've been in. A lot of it for a manufacturer is in the goods that you make. So the raw materials with your suppliers, and then down the line with your customers and how they're using it. So when I think about the ripple effect that we can have as a manufacturer, there's all the great stuff we can do and have done to reduce our own impact. But where it really scales is when you talk to your suppliers and say, hey, I need more recycled content. Or, hey, I'm looking for a carbon negative material, a material that sequesters carbon in its life. What do you have? Or, those sorts of conversations really can drive down, yes, your own impact, but it also means that there's this ripple effect outside of your boundaries as a company. They're selling to other people, your competitors, other markets. And that's really where the scale, at least at Interface, but I think across the board, has been so enormous, is influencing the supply chain and influencing our customers to ask for more sustainable products, to really how you get it to scale.
In terms of the suppliers, have you found throughout your career and even your work at Interface, are more suppliers kind of getting on board with the sustainability side and kind of pushing themselves to, reach a level and matching the expectations of a company like Interface?
Yeah, I think when we started this journey, and Interface has been on this journey long before I started here 5 years ago. It's been about 30 years at Interface. When we started this journey, I think we were so early that everyone thought we were a little nuts and said, what is this thing about sustainability and what are life cycle assessments and all of that. I think that as things have developed and as we've seen how much value it's driven at Interface, but also our suppliers have seen value in creating life cycle assessments and offering that to other customers. We've seen more and more customers ask for it. I think as there's more and more questions around it, and I would say increasing amounts of regulation coming, some from California, some from Europe. All of that means that it's becoming more and more mainstream that suppliers are just having to kind of generate the in greenhouse gas inventories, the life cycle assessment data, uh, product carbon footprints, so that they can match what their competitors are providing and show how they're competitive in this space where we're getting so many questions.
And just to level set really quick, so many of the individuals that listen to the podcast are, corporate social impact or ESG, for example, mainly social impact. And they're just now kind of wrapping their head around sustainability and what it means, for their career and maybe how they can kind of evolve their own work and to be more kind of ESG focused. From your perspective, what does sustainability mean at a corporation specifically?
Yes, I think it's important in thinking about sustainability to realize it isn't just the environmental piece. Being good at sustainability means people, planet, and profit. And certainly at a for-profit corporation, we need to remember that we need to do this in a way in order to scale it, that is a good price, We aren't, adding so much cost that, we wouldn't be specified. We actually want to stay at that sort of cost neutral so we can continue to compete with that price. So that's important so we can continue to grow and profit. But also importantly is that social side, when we think about people. And so at Interface, there has been a ton of work on culture and the culture around sustainability and making sure our people have a great place to work. They feel value in the work that they do, but also reaching out to our suppliers and making sure that they have good working conditions as well. So I think all of that is super connected. The environmental part is what I speak to most in my role. But all of it is interconnected, and a good environment is good for people and it's good for profit long term.
And you mentioned interface, so I think it's a good point now to talk a little bit more about interface and what the company does.
Sure. So, Interface is a global flooring manufacturer. We manufacture carpet tiles, rubber flooring, and we also sell LVT, luxury vinyl tile. And so you've probably seen us, in your workplace as a carpet tile, in a hospital as Nora Flooring, and LVT in sort of any of those spaces, in airports, in airport lounges. We're kind of all over the place. You may not notice us because we're below your feet, but we're all over. And I think what is so great about Interface is, like I was saying earlier, Interface has been on this sustainability journey for 30 years. So we are a unique place to work. Our founder had what he called a spear in the chest moment in his time as well. So I'm sort of stealing his language and spear in the chest, but he realized that he was making a profit at the Earth's expense, and that he really wanted to reorient the company in a way that was positive for the people who worked there, for the planet, and to grow in size as a company. So that's the mission we've been on now for over 30 years.
And you mentioned that you joined about 5 years ago.
5 years ago, yes. Yep.
When you joined the company, what was your responsibility at that particular moment in time?
Yes, so I started with the greenhouse gas accounting side of the picture. So and what we called ecometrics. So that's really all of the environmental data, collecting that across our 6 manufacturing facilities and our 50 or so offices and warehouses. So collecting all of that data, processing it, telling compelling stories based on the progress that we've made there, and also thinking about how we can continue to reduce those emissions based on that data.
How has your role changed over the years?
Yes. So it has evolved since I've been here in the past 5 years. I have gotten an expanded role where I've thankfully entrusted someone amazing on my team to run the greenhouse gas inventory, and all of our metrics around that. So now I've been able to expand to think about how are we going to achieve some really ambitious, what we have, science-based targets by 2030. So those are very regimented, verified targets that we're going to continue to reduce our impacts in scope 1 and scope 2, as well as our biggest category within scope 3. And then we want to get to carbon negative across all of our scopes by 2040 and do it without offsets, which is crazy challenging and quite ambitious. And that means that my role is a lot of getting the right people in the same room, because what we know from looking at the data is most of our impact is within our products. It's about 85% of our emissions come from our products. So we need to continue to innovate around that, and that means getting in the room with our our product team, our procurement team, our R&D team, operations, all of those people together are how we're going to be able to make this happen. And it's really exciting to have that sort of strategic lens on how we can achieve really ambitious goals and then go and execute it across a business.
Somebody listening to this episode might think carbon negative without offsets, whoa, but why? Like, what's the strategy behind doing that without offsets? Just so, listeners can understand.
Sure. So we at Interface did use offsets for some time as a bridge strategy, and just to give a little bit of context around offsets, that would be going outside of our value chain and purchasing a ton of carbon that has been either avoided from being put into the environment or is somehow sequestered. But what we realized is when we started to, and this is where innovation comes into play for sure, is we had created a product in our carpet tile product. So our backing is actually a type of our backing, our Sequest Bio and BioX backings are carbon negative, and that's without offsets. So we did that through a ton of innovation with our suppliers by getting lower and lower carbon footprints. Like I said earlier, seeking those sources that are actually carbon negative and sequester carbon in their life cycle, and at a net sum that is carbon negative. Once we had gotten there, we were like, oh my gosh, what if we did this more? Right? And what if we invested more and more in making this happen in a way that our customers can realize carbon negative within their reporting, that we can recognize within our reporting, because offsets are kind of on the side of reporting, and in a way that we could really measure it. And actually, in 2025, beginning of last year, we prototyped that we were able to create a carbon negative rubber flooring, which is really impressive because it's an even higher carbon impact product generally. So, just continuing to expand that innovation across our portfolio is why we decided we wanted to make those investments in internally with our supply chain and with our customers so that we could achieve our goals.
How do you get suppliers on board with not just what you're talking about, but just in general in terms of where Interface wants to go from a sustainability perspective? Obviously, you have to go have conversations with suppliers to, let them know what the vision is. They have to be on board too in order to provide what it is that you need. Can you take me kind of inside without obviously revealing too much, those type of conversations and kind of um, how practitioners should approach going to a supplier and having a conversation with them to get them on board with the kind of the vision?
Sure, sure. So I think there is absolutely a collaborative approach when we approach a supplier. So the way that we at Interface have started approaching it is actually increasingly structured, where we have a scale of, what is their carbon maturity, and on a scale from they don't even know what it is and haven't started measuring, all the way up to they've reached net zero and they're doing more than we've been able to do at Interface just yet. So there's sort of a scale, and we talk to them, here's where we are, here's where we want to go in the future, and we want to collaborate with you on how to get there. And so we've started those conversations around what's next, what's in the pipeline for you, how can we help you get further, how can we align on what you're doing with what we're doing, whether it's more recycled content, renewable energy, those sorts of initiatives. What do you have in the pipeline? How can we help? Even down to, hey, this is our first time as a supplier um, doing our greenhouse gas inventory, and we don't know how to do scope 3, and we'll have a call with them and say, like, here's what we do, and here's some other people you can work with. So I think having that collaborative partnership conversation has really helped us over time, and we've started to get more formal about it, as I said, in the last couple of years. But even before that, just asking for the data. So we've been asking for life cycle assessment data for years, and having those conversations has helped us measure our impacts and then figure out, okay, well, these are the hot spots, and we really want to focus on, say yarn, because that's one of our higher impact products, and how do we reduce within that and have those collaborative conversations there.
Have you ever had a supplier in the supply chain that just wasn't on board with the vision of Interface? And if so, what was their pushback, if they did push back at all?
I think historically, yes, certainly. I think because we've been at it for a while, it has evolved over time, and there's a little bit of, if you aren't on the bus, then you know that's fine. We'll find somebody else. But I think one of the great stories that we had in our past is we actually asked our yarn suppliers, hey, this was, I think, mid 2000s. Hey, can you give us recycled content? We know this is where most, in a carpet tile, this is where a lot of our impact is in the yarn that goes into our carpet tile. And I think at the time there were three manufacturers or four manufacturers in the room, and a couple of them laughed and said, "Ha, that's impossible. We can't do that, and no one can. So why would we invest in that?" But a couple of our suppliers did invest in that and did find a way to recycle, and have still to this day absolutely are recycling content and bringing that footprint down. So we have 100% recycled yarn in a number of our products. And I think what has been amazing about that, first of all, they've seen the benefit. You know, Econil is a great example of this, very specifically with one of our partners, Aquafil, where now they're selling to, luxury brands like Prada and others that want to have this story around recycled fishing nets and things like that, and they're selling to us, and we get the carbon benefit. They're also selling to our competitors, and they're getting the carbon benefit back to that ripple effect. And then I think the ones that haven't come along with us on the journey get less and less business over time, until perhaps they don't get our business, depending on, what the material is in the structure.
And I imagine as more companies have kind of a vision like Interface in terms of sustainability, more suppliers will probably get on board because they see kind of the writing on the wall in terms of what companies are expecting and what they want from their supply chain. So I imagine their tune changes pretty quickly.
That's right. That's right. I think there's a lot of benefits at this point, and there's a risk to not participating now. You may have delayed a decade, but now you got to get on board because the writing's on the wall, as you said.
Talk to me a little bit more about the sustainability strategy at Interface in terms of you mentioned a couple things like the carbon negative without the offsets. Is there anything else in the strategy that you're focused on?
Sure. So, I mean, I would say that a big focus for us in the last couple of years is this: we're going all in on carbon negative by 2040 and doing it without offsets, and thinking through the ways that we get there, which are avoiding carbon, reducing carbon, storing carbon, so storing carbon in our products, and then inspiring others. So that has been key for us in the last couple of years. But I think beyond carbon, we've also been having really great conversations and work streams around what is happening in the social area, particularly with our suppliers, and how we continue to advance conversations there. And then thinking about, you know, everything is all connected, including nature and biodiversity. So, how do we think about carbon and social impacts and nature and biodiversity in a way that we become an increasingly regenerative business?
Inspiring others.
Yes.
Talk to me a little bit more about that.
Yes. So I would say, it's things like this. It's also things like talking to our customers and inspiring them to think about what we're doing, ask other people what they're doing, and it's also about inspiring people within our business. So a great example of that is we just reintroduced a revamped what we're calling all in sustainability champions, which is an internal training around everything Interface has done in sustainability and where we're heading, because we know it's not just the people with sustainability in their title that we need to get this done. We need everyone in the company to understand what it is, where we're going, and be inspired to join us on that journey.
Can you talk a little bit more about that training in terms of what's included?
Sure, sure. So we have it's 6 modules. We worked on it with a partner to make it look nice and be a very professional output. But I would say it covers things like the history, the people across the business who are working on it, not just in sustainability, but in different aspects. It covers topics from Ray and his inspiration to where we're going next, and gives a bit of a groundwork for things like what when I say scope 1, 2, and 3, what does that mean? Scope 1 and 2 is operations, scope 3 is beyond our boundaries. So how do we get everyone aligned on the language as a baseline, and then get them thinking about how it applies to their job? So there's a lot of questions and back and forth, and how can you apply this to what you do in your work? So it's very intentional in that way.
Is the training provided like once a year, multiple times a year?
So the way we have it set up is that all new employees will get it, and then we have everyone gets this first. We're calling it the level 1 training. Um, it's actually, I think it's due at the end of this month that we'll have everyone who's digitally enabled, has a computer access, will go through this training, and we're looking on how we expand that to our frontline workers, so those in manufacturing who may not sit at a computer every day. And then beyond this level 1 module training, we're also going to bring a couple additional levels for those that are interested and want to continue on their sustainability journey and really be champions of sustainability within Interface. So there will be further learnings that expand outside of the Interface perspective coming soon. So we're working
That's
that out
incredible.
now. Yeah.
That's awesome. So we talked about your career journey. We talked about sustainability at Interface. So what I want to do now is shift gears a little bit and kind of look at corporate impact, sustainability, kind of at a higher level. For a company that might be early on in their sustainability journey, maybe they're thinking about it, maybe they've just started. What advice would you give a company like that based off of what you have experienced throughout your career in terms of scaling sustainability?
Data, data, data. I think you can't make effective, scalable change without knowing what the scale is first. So, my first recommendation is always to start measuring. And when I say measure, it also don't let perfection be the enemy of the good here, but get an idea where your impacts are so that you can know what to work on first, prioritize that. And then it's get momentum going. So start recording those quick wins when you find a way that you can reduce your impact, save money. I mean, businesses love that. And right? And that can really get you that further investment, get that momentum going so you can say like this is a value to the company, or if it's not save money, these are extra sales we generated, or you know, other ways that you can really show that value. Here's the storytelling value that we got with our customers. So I think that's how you get started, is figuring out first what is the impact, and then how do you prioritize and build momentum based on those key areas.
What about pitfalls? Are there any pitfalls that companies should be on the lookout for?
Ooh, pitfalls. Um, yeah, I mean, certainly there are. Um, I think that one of the things that becomes increasingly hard as we get further and further along this journey is trying to figure out what the value is, because it may not be that instant ROI. It might be a longer term value, reduction in risk, new opportunities that we hadn't identified in the past. That when you um, when you've been at this a while becomes like trying to navigate that so you don't fall into that trap where you're always having to produce an ROI on each project, but instead creating a vision that gives you the ability to invest in some interesting and innovative things um, that you believe will return value, and then continuing to follow up to prove that value over time.
If you had to build a sustainability function from scratch, knowing what you know now, where would you start? What would that look like?
Ooh, yeah, this is a great question. And I do think it very much depends on what your business is. So I'll preface it with that. But what I can speak to is from a manufacturer's point of view. And I guess more broadly, I'll say again, data, data, data. So where is your impact? But from a manufacturer's point of view, I would say sustainability needs to be very closely intertwined with innovation and product for a manufacturer, just knowing how much of the impact lives within the product. So I would say if I were starting a function from new, that I would make sure that the sustainability function is closely connected and given I don't, rights isn't the right word, but like ability to action and be valued within those teams to make sure that they can voice, you know, this is the science behind the data and where we need to go in terms of carbon impact and other impacts, and link those with how you can make change happen within the products, which then helps the entire footprint of the company.
That very much aligns with what I've heard on the social impact front too. Right now, a lot of corporate impact leaders, they're stuck in this kind of perception of being a cost center or a nice to have within their businesses. And one of the things that a lot of practitioners are starting to do more of now is to figure out how to integrate specifically social impact within their companies. Like how do we leverage things like volunteering or grant making, things like that to help solve specific problems in our companies and help the company overall scale. So it sounds very much in terms of what you're talking about on the sustainability front. The whole business integration is so critical to the scale of the work.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that. And one other thing I wanted to mention is we recently moved into the legal department, which has also been a really valuable place for us because, increasingly as we see sustainability, I think same with so environmental sustainability, but similar with social sustainability becoming something that's increasingly regulated. That gives it sort of a level of importance where if you're coming from the legal department and you work with these other functions, there's that sort of elevated presence of what you have to say and less so of a cost center issue, I would say.
Now, if you had to take a step back and make a prediction about what sustainability, specifically in the corporate sector, will look like in the next, say, 5 to 7 years, what would your prediction be?
I think that what we see is there are waves within the public perception, within regulation, within policies, all of that. But what we have found is good constants within interface. And I think will continue to be true over the next 5 to 7, 10, 20 years is you can you can't totally ignore those waves, but try to ignore those waves and keep doing the good work because it does pay out over time. So there's a lot of noise out there. Interface has stayed true to this sustainability mission for 30 years. We're continuing to have those conversations to push that action, and there will be moments where it's more valued and moments where it's a little less valued. But if you continue, then you can really drive that with your customers and see the value over time.
Okay, let's end with this. If you could eliminate one habit or belief that's holding sustainability back in the corporate sector, what would it be?
The one belief is that sustainability costs more. It does not have to cost more. Um, I think that Interface has done an amazing job of finding ways to specify one material that costs more while finding it that has a great carbon footprint and another product that has, the same carbon footprint but at a lower cost so that you can find that cost neutrality, for example. Um, Sustainability doesn't have to cost more. It You can deliver great sustainability to your customers at the price of your competition, and it just comes along for the ride, and that's how you scale it. Because if it's your one differentiator, it's not enough. But if you're at Interface, we say no compromises, so we're delivering design, performance, innovation, and sustainability. So we're delivering that no matter what, and great if you're looking for it as a customer. But even if you're not, you're going to be an accidental environmentalist by buying our products. So
Liz, thank you so much for joining me and walking me through your career and peeling back the curtain on what sustainability looks like at Interface. Appreciate you joining.
thanks, Jeremy. Really enjoyed the conversation.
This episode is brought to you by Social Impact World, the intelligence layer for corporate impact. To learn more, go to socialimpactworld.com. I'm Jeremy Brown. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Behind the Impact.